These are the 8 richest families that own Georgia, and their influence on the state is absolutely insane. We have a dynasty pulling more than $18 billion a year from gas stations, a family worth about $12.7 billion because America apparently refuses to run out of termites. And at number 1, you will see a 4th-generation clan that can sell you internet, tell you what your used car is worth, and publish the newspaper on your breakfast table. Let's get into it. Number 8. The Woodruff Legacy. Let's kick this off with a family whose fortune became so woven into Atlanta that, at some point, the money stopped looking like money and started looking like buildings. Look around the city and you will see the name Woodruff on an arts center, a health sciences center, a nursing school, scholarship programs, and foundations. That is not because the family invented an unusually aggressive naming rights strategy. It is because Coca-Cola money helped finance a serious chunk of modern Atlanta. The story really turns in 1919, when banker Ernest Woodruff led a group of investors that bought the Coca-Cola company from Asa Candler for $25 million. His son Robert borrowed money to buy stock because he thought the company had a future. 4 years later, Coca-Cola was struggling. Its shares had fallen hard, and Robert Woodruff was asked to become president at just 33. Think about that setup. Your father helps buy the company, you borrow money to bet on it, the stock drops, and then somebody hands you the steering wheel. Most people would be sweating through the suit. Woodruff took the job and spent the next several decades turning Coke from a popular American drink into something close to a global language. During World War II, he pushed to make Coca-Cola available to American service members for 5 cents a bottle wherever they were stationed. The company built dozens of wartime bottling plants abroad, and those plants helped create the international distribution system that exploded after the war. That is one of those business moves that sounds patriotic in the moment and, decades later, also looks suspiciously like a world expansion strategy hiding inside a care package. But here is why the Woodruffs sit at number 8 instead of near the top. There is no clean, credible current number for a single Woodruff family fortune, because enormous amounts of the wealth were deliberately pushed into philanthropy. In 1979, Robert and his brother George gave Emory University 3 million shares of Coca-Cola stock worth $105 million, the first 9-figure gift to an American institution of higher education. And the giving machine is still enormous. The Robert W. Woodruff Foundation ended 2025 with about $4.62 billion in assets, and says it has awarded roughly $4.2 billion in grants since 1937. That money is not a personal family piggy bank, so we are not counting it as net worth. But it tells you what the original fortune became. Some dynasties leave yachts. The Woodruffs left pieces of Atlanta's operating system. Now, the Woodruff money became hospitals and institutions. Our next family built its fortune on something much closer to the ground. Literally. You may be standing on it right now. Number 7. The Lorberbomb family. Number 7 starts with bath mats, which is not normally where a billion-dollar story begins. Alan Lorberbomb founded Aladdin Mills in 1957 as a small carpet and bath mat manufacturer in Georgia. His son Jeffrey joined the family business in 1976 and learned the flooring game from the factory up. Then came the move that changed the scale completely. In 1994, Mohawk Industries acquired Aladdin, and instead of taking the money and disappearing, Jeffrey moved deeper into the combined company. He became chief executive of Mohawk in 2001 and spent the next quarter-century turning it into what Forbes describes as the largest flooring company in the world. Carpet was only the beginning. Mohawk expanded into ceramic tile, laminate, wood, vinyl, and other hard surfaces, buying companies around the world until the business was selling into more than 170 countries. Here is the part that makes the family angle real rather than decorative. Jeffrey is not just a hired CEO sitting in the old family chair. Mohawk's 2026 proxy says he beneficially owns about 16.5% of the public company, much of it tied to family entities that trace back to Aladdin. Forbes currently estimates his fortune at roughly $1.3 billion. That means a family bath mat company did not simply get swallowed by a bigger corporation. It became the launchpad from which one of the sellers eventually took over the buyer. That is a very different kind of exit strategy, and there is something wonderfully Georgia about the geography of it. Mohawk is headquartered in Calhoun, right in the middle of the Northwest Georgia flooring belt, a region where carpet factories, trucking companies, chemical suppliers, and family businesses all grew around each other until an industry cluster appeared almost by accident. How many fortunes can you literally walk across without ever knowing the owner's name? That is the Lorberbomb trick. The product disappears under couches, hotel beds, and office chairs, while the ownership compounds quietly above it. But carpet is still only carpet. Our next family built a business so reliable that emergency managers started using whether its restaurants were open as a rough signal for how badly a storm had hit. Speaking of families who spotted a fortune in something everybody else walks right past, there's a program someone on our team has been curious about called the Billionaire Brain Wave. It's a simple 7-minute audio built around theta brainwave research, the deep focus brain state linked to where big creative ideas come from. You put on headphones once a day, usually with your morning coffee, and that's the whole routine. It's a one-time $39, it comes with bonus guides on money habits and investing basics, and there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So testing it costs you nothing if it's not for you. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description. Now, back to Georgia and the diner empire that never turns its lights off. Number 6. The Rogers family. If a hurricane hits the South and the local Waffle House closes, people notice. Former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate even popularized an unofficial Waffle House index. Full menu means things are probably manageable, limited menu means trouble, and closed doors mean you should start paying very close attention. That is a ridiculous amount of cultural power for a restaurant whose signature move is putting hash browns on a plate. Waffle House began in 1955 when neighbors Joe Rogers Sr. and Tom Faulkner opened the first location in Avondale Estates, Georgia. The idea was almost aggressively simple: a friendly diner, open 24 hours, serving the same basic food fast enough that regular people would come back constantly. The real family fortune was built by Joe Rogers Jr., who took over at 26 in 1973. At the time, the company was not the perfectly controlled machine you might imagine today. It had 2 family ownership groups: debt, franchise locations, and direct control of only about 30% of the restaurants. Rogers Jr. spent years simplifying the mess. He consolidated ownership into his side of the family, reduced the company's dependence on debt, bought back franchises, and kept the whole operation private. Today, the Rogers family has the controlling share. Forbes estimates Joe Rogers Jr.'s personal fortune at about $2 billion, and Waffle House has roughly 2,100 locations across 25 states with estimated revenue above $1 billion. The strangest part is that the company did not get rich by constantly reinventing itself. It got rich by almost refusing to. Same tiny menu, same open kitchen, same coffee, same yellow sign glowing at 2 in the morning when you are making decisions your daytime self may not approve of. Rogers once described the company as basically a throwback diner, and that understatement may be the whole secret. When everybody else chased trends, Waffle House chased repetition. And repetition at 2,100 locations becomes a fortune. The Rogers family turned eggs and stubborn consistency into $2 billion. Our next dynasty sells something even more repetitive: the gallon of gas you're going to need again next week, and the week after that, and probably forever. Number 5. The Bulch family. Number 5 is the Bulch family, and this is where a gas station starts behaving like a private conglomerate. Carl Bulch Sr. started the business in 1934, and the family eventually moved its headquarters to Atlanta, where the next generations expanded what became RICHEST. Today, it is a third-generation family-owned company run by Natalie Morehouse, the founder's granddaughter. Now look at the scale. Forbes says RICHEST generated about $18.5 billion in revenue in its latest reporting year. The company has nearly 800 racetrack and raceway locations, plus fuel logistics businesses and the Gulf Oil brand. There are more than 160 racetrack stores in Georgia alone. And this is exactly where private company wealth gets slippery. The Bulch family does not publish a current family net worth, and the last widely cited Forbes family estimate is more than a decade old, so pretending we know the exact number today would be fake precision. What we can verify is an $18 billion a year private business still controlled by the third generation. That is plenty. But the really fun move came in 2025. Racetrack paid about $566 million to buy Potbelly, the Chicago sandwich chain. Yes, the gas station family bought the sandwich shop. The deal closed that October, giving Racetrack hundreds of restaurants and another brand to expand. Pause on the logic for a second. A family gets rich because millions of people stop for fuel, coffee, and snacks, then decides the next move is to own more of what those same people eat. That is not diversification so much as following the customer around the parking lot. And the succession story matters. Racetrack has survived 3 generations without selling to a public company or private equity fund, while still growing big enough to spend more than $500 million on an acquisition. Plenty of family businesses can manage privacy. Far fewer can manage privacy and scale at the same time. The Bulches built an $18 billion machine around the fact that America is always 5 exits away from needing something. But gas stations are still anonymous. Our next man bought assets so visible that half of Atlanta has screamed inside one of them. Number 4. The Blank family. Arthur Blank is not a 4-generation dynasty, so we are keeping this one tighter. But leaving him off a list about who owns Georgia would be like doing a tour of Atlanta and pretending the giant silver stadium downtown just appeared naturally. Blank and Bernie Marcus founded Home Depot in 1978 after both men were fired from the same regional hardware chain. That is the first punchline. 2 executives get shown the door, then respond by creating the business that eventually makes them billionaires. Blank retired from Home Depot leadership in 2001 and immediately started buying Atlanta in a much more literal way. In 2002, he bought the Falcons for $545 million. Forbes says his stake is now worth roughly $2.5 billion. Then he launched Atlanta United, bought the PGA Tour Superstore business, and built the $1.5 billion Mercedes-Benz Stadium as the shared home of his football and soccer teams. Forbes currently estimates Blank's fortune at around $10.7 billion. The part I find interesting is that he could have taken the Home Depot money and become a quiet investor in Florida. Instead, he converted retail wealth into civic visibility. A hardware store fortune became a football team, a soccer club, a stadium, and a sports district sitting in the middle of Atlanta. And if you want a tiny detail that captures the man's brain, Blank started little landscaping and laundry businesses while he was still in college. Apparently, some people discover leisure at 19. Others discover unit economics. He is not a dynasty yet, but with 6 children and a family office managing a huge collection of assets and philanthropy, the succession question is already sitting there waiting. Blank turned being fired into one of the most recognizable ownership portfolios in the state. Our next family made even more money from something far less glamorous, which is bad news if you have ever heard scratching inside a wall. Number 3. The Rollins family. The Rollins family is worth about $12.7 billion because bugs keep showing up uninvited. That is the cleanest explanation. The story begins with brothers Wayne and John Rollins, sons of a Depression-era farmer who decided they had no interest in spending their lives, as Wayne later put it, plowing that mule. They first made money in radio and television, which already sounds like a respectable family fortune. Then, in 1964, they spent $62 million buying Orkin, a pest control company founded by a teenager who had started selling rat poison door to door. That purchase became the monster asset. Rollins Inc., headquartered in Atlanta, now owns Orkin, Critter Control, and a collection of other pest management brands. The company produced about $3.8 billion in 2025 sales and serves more than 2 million customers through hundreds of company-owned and franchise locations around the world. And this is not one of those old fortunes where the descendants cashed out and kept the surname. The family still has serious control. Rollins' 2026 proxy shows a family-linked shareholder group with about 37.9% of the company's stock, while Forbes estimates the broader Rollins family fortune at roughly $12.7 billion. So every termite inspection, rodent callout, and recurring pest contract feeds a public company that still has a giant family hand on the steering wheel. There is almost something unfairly elegant about the economics. You can cancel a streaming service. You can stop buying fancy shoes. But if termites start eating your house, you suddenly become a very motivated customer. Recurring revenue meets recurring insects. Wall Street loves a subscription business. The Rollins family just found one with antennae. The family has sold billions of dollars of stock in recent years and still retains an enormous position. That is what a mature dynasty looks like. You can take money off the table without getting up from the table. The Rollins family turned pest control into a $12 billion fortune. But our next dynasty built something more valuable while voluntarily locking every restaurant door one day a week. Number 2. The Cathy family. Here is a business decision that should make every efficiency consultant twitch. Build one of the largest restaurant chains in America, then close every single location on Sundays. The Cathy family has been doing exactly that for generations, and Forbes now estimates the family fortune at about $40.2 billion. S. Truett Cathy started with a tiny diner called the Dwarf Grill in Hapeville in 1946. He later developed the chicken sandwich that became Chick-fil-A and opened the first branded location in Atlanta's Greenbrier Mall in 1967. From there, the company grew around a very specific operating culture: obsessive service, limited menus, carefully selected operators, private ownership, and the Sunday closure Truett insisted on from the beginning. Today, Chick-fil-A generates about $10.3 billion in annual company revenue and operates more than 3,000 restaurants, mostly franchised, across 48 states. Forbes also estimates the private company itself at about $46.1 billion. And the family control is unusually clean. The Cathys still own 100%. Dan Cathy is chairman, Bubba Cathy remains an executive, Trudy Cathy White serves as an ambassador for the brand, and third-generation Andrew Cathy took over as chief executive in 2021. That succession matters. Plenty of founders say they are building something for their grandchildren. The Cathys actually handed the CEO office to one. Now, before we move to number 1, here is the nerdy little truth that keeps this ranking honest. If you sort only by Forbes' June 2026 family net worth estimates, the Cathys actually edge the Cox family, about $40.2 billion versus $38 billion. So yes, somebody in the comments with a calculator would technically have a point. But this series is not just a spreadsheet of estimated fortunes. We are ranking the combination of wealth, family control, generations, and how deeply the empire runs through the state. And on breadth, the final family is playing an entirely different game, because the Cathys can sell you lunch. Number 1 can sell you internet, price your car, run the auction where the dealer bought it, publish your local newspaper, and, after one of the biggest cable deals in years, still walk away owning a massive piece of the combined machine. Number 1. The Cox family. Number 1 is the Cox family, and the funny thing is that their empire did not begin in Georgia at all. It began with a school janitor in Ohio. James M. Cox worked on his family's farm, taught school, cleaned classrooms, and then fell in love with newspapers. In 1898, he borrowed $26,000 from friends and family to buy the Dayton Evening News. He later became a 3-term governor of Ohio and even ran for president in 1920, with a young Franklin D. Roosevelt as his vice presidential running mate. That presidential campaign failed spectacularly. The family business did not. Cox kept buying media properties, and in 1939 he purchased the Atlanta Journal, which came with WSB radio. In 1950, he added the Atlanta Constitution. Atlanta gradually became the center of gravity, and the next generation started doing something much more important than simply collecting newspapers. It kept jumping into industries before those industries looked obvious. In 1962, the company bought 3 small cable systems in Pennsylvania with fewer than 12,000 combined subscribers. Cable television was still a weird little business designed partly to improve reception in places where antennas struggled. Cox saw a network. 6 years later, the family bought Mannheim Auto Auction. Again, strange move. Why would a media company want used car auctions? Because over time, Mannheim became the world's largest wholesale automotive marketplace, and Cox built an entire automotive division around it. Today, Cox Automotive owns brands such as AutoTrader, Kelley Blue Book, DealerTrack, and Mannheim. So if you have ever checked what your car is worth online, browsed a used listing, financed dealer inventory, or watched cars flow through an auction, there is a decent chance you have touched the Cox ecosystem without seeing the family name. Meanwhile, Cox Communications grew into one of America's largest cable and broadband providers, serving millions of homes and businesses. The family also still owns the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and Axios, and has poured billions into newer businesses including greenhouse agriculture, recycling, and clean technology. By 2025, Cox Enterprises was generating about $23.1 billion in annual revenue. Forbes estimates the family's fortune at roughly $38 billion. And this is now fourth-generation control. Alex Taylor, the founder's great-grandson, is chairman and chief executive. But here is the part that makes this #1 entry feel like it is happening in real time. In 2025, Cox agreed to combine Cox Communications with Charter Communications in a transaction valuing the Cox cable business at roughly $21.9 billion in equity, or about $34.5 billion including debt. And as of August 13, 2026, California regulators had just given the deal the final state approval it needed to move forward. So does that mean the family is finally selling the title promise and walking away from cable? Not exactly. This is where it gets clever. When the transaction closes, Cox Enterprises is expected to own roughly 23% of the combined publicly traded company. Alex Taylor is set to become chairman of the board. The combined company plans to adopt the Cox Communications name within a year, and the business will still maintain a major presence on the family's Atlanta campus. Think about the move. After more than 60 years of building a private cable company, the family is exchanging that asset for a huge stake in an even larger national communications company. They are not leaving the table. They are making the table bigger. And that is the Cox family's entire history in one move. Newspaper to radio to television, television to cable, media to auto auctions to digital car shopping, cable into a national merger. The trick is not holding the exact same asset forever. The trick is keeping family capital alive while the technology underneath it changes. That is why Cox takes #1 here, even with the Cathy family's slightly higher current Forbes estimate. No other Georgia dynasty on this list reaches into as many ordinary parts of American life while still operating under fourth-generation family leadership. You can eat at a Cathy restaurant. You can watch a blank football team. You can call Rollins when something crawls into the attic. But the Cox family can be hiding in the wire to your house, the website open while you shop for a car, the auction behind the dealership, and the newspaper sitting on your phone. That is not one business. That is infrastructure with a family tree. And those are 8 of the richest families that own Georgia, from Coca-Cola money that turned into hospitals and universities, to carpet, waffles, gasoline, football, termites, chicken sandwiches, and finally the fourth-generation Cox machine sitting behind communications, cars, and media. So which one surprised you most? The Waffle House dynasty whose restaurants became an unofficial storm signal? The family making billions because termites refuse to retire? Or Cox quietly sitting behind your internet and the price of your used car? Drop it in the comments, hit the like button if any of these caught you off guard, and subscribe to Global Status, because we break down the families behind the empires every single week.